What's up, guys? Midnight Hatter here, and today we're going to be talking some game dev stuff. You've probably seen other videos on what a massively easy to use and fast prototyping asset that Adobe Fuse, in conjunction with Mixamo animations, can be when building games in both Unity or Unreal Engine. If not, you're going to learn a little bit about that here, but I'm actually going to take that workflow a step further by showing you how I use Adobe Fuse, Mixamo, and free Unity assets to rapidly produce and prototype highly stylized characters in Unity. If you follow my channel, you already know how much of a cheapskate I am, and I love finding a good shortcut because time is money. The faster I can get to designing levels and quests for my game as opposed to building the assets and characters, the better. Now, you could go out and buy or download assets online, but then you kind of lose your game's individuality because you're sharing those assets with other people that have downloaded them. And in worst case scenario, you have an inconsistent hodgepodge of visual styles. Adobe Fuse is an amazing piece of 3D character creating software, and in conjunction with a little texture tweaking in Adobe Photoshop, you can create and animate highly stylized and visually consistent characters for your game. Let me show you. First, let's look at our required software and materials. You're going to have to download Unity 5, at least for this tutorial. If you do want to see the Unreal Engine workflow, do let me know in the comments below. But for now, I'm going to cover Unity 5. I prefer working in Unity. Both of them are free to download as long as you are making less than $100,000 a year, which I fall cleanly into that category. Next, you're going to need Adobe Creative Cloud. Now, I know that at time of recording, Adobe Creative Cloud is running about $52.99 a month, which is so steep. But if you are working in a creative field, particularly in game development or any kind of graphic design, you're really selling yourself short if you don't invest in Adobe Creative Cloud. I know that it's kind of mainstream, but it is industry standard software, and you're kind of cheating yourself if you're going to work in things like Clip Studio or GIMP, and you're really missing out on some of these amazing free assets that you get as part of the subscription. Which brings me to the next part of it is Mixamo. Mixamo is an in-browser animation software that was acquired by Adobe a couple of years ago. They still support it for now. It lost some functionality, but I'm going to show you how to work around that. Next, you're going to need to download the Unity 3D Game Kit. It's a free set of assets that you can build a game, from scratch. It's amazing, comes with scripts and terrain and characters and enemies and all kinds of good stuff, and we're going to be using that to sort of retarget our character once we've developed it. And finally, you have the option of just using the Unity standard assets, in particular the third-person character. Retargeting the third-person character from the standard assets is a lot easier than retargeting your character in the 3D Game Kit, but I think you'll see once we work through both of them that the 3D Game Kit is way superior. You're going to have a lot more scripting options and attacks and animations. It's really just a better package, but I'll walk you through both workflows just in case you want to go with the easy route. So now let me talk to you about the workflow outline. What we're going to do is we're actually going to create the character in Adobe Fuse. I'm going to show you the settings that we need to use in order to get that highly stylized look. Then we're going to upload that character to Mixamo, select some animations, and download them as a package into Unity. Once the character's in Unity and we make sure that all the materials are rendering properly, we're going to open up Photoshop and edit the textures of the character to give them that more cartoony look. Then I will show you the two different options for retargeting the player character so that you don't have to build a player controller from scratch. You can use some of the free Unity assets. That way, I'm against writing code if you don't have to. So let's just use what's out there and use what's free. And I'm going to walk you through it. It's a lot easier than you think it's going to be. So first, here's what you will see when you first open Adobe Fuse. Obviously, we've got some model heads over here. We've got what is going to be our panel where we see our character. But what we're going to do is, if this is the first time you've ever opened Adobe Fuse, you're going to want to go into these settings anyway. If there's one thing you take away from this video, it's this. The preference settings for Adobe Fuse. You're going to go to Fuse and Preferences. Now, you want to make sure that your character export options are at one scale. You can scale them down, which helps for programs like Blender, but we'll talk about that later. What you're going to want to do is down here in the app options, usually this maximum adjustment shape value is set to 0. Normally you would set it to 100 in order to give you some morph options when it comes to the character's looks. But what we're going to do is we're going to actually push that way beyond what it's supposed to be. We're going to put in 300 here. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to morph our character to some insane cartoony proportions, and it's going to make making that stylized character so much easier. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So let's go in here and we're just going to create a male character. We'll use this male fit A as our basis. As you can see, as you select parts of their body, it builds the body from the ground up for you. And this is awesome because, you basically just have this 3D character built for you. And what's nice about these characters is that they're already realistic looking, so if your game relies on realism, then you can stop right here. You don't have to do any of the crazy stuff. But I think that, let me show you what my project is looking like over here in Unity. So my assets are some cartoony, hand-painted assets, and it would look really goofy if we had, this sort of realistic, uncanny valley breaking character playing in this little sandbox that we have here. So for me, that character's not going to do. And that's why what we're going to do is open up this Customize tab. If you are familiar with the character builders in popular RPGs like the Elder Scrolls series and Fallout, you're basically using the same set of sliders and morph targets to distort the body and change the features of this character. We're just taking it a step further by making these morph options exaggerated. So what we're going to do is first, I am going to randomize this character, see if I can't get, at least a different looking face to start with. And you see that by changing those maximums, you get some really odd results when you hit randomize. But let's start with this. He's a little goofy looking. Let's pan up to the head here. And because the head is probably going to be the most important part when you are making a stylized character. We'll make sure that the expressions are set to 0. This is interesting because you can actually set some goofy expressions by just using these sliders here. But I don't like to do that because then when you open up Unity, then that character has a permanent goofy expression on their face, and so we don't want that. Instead, we're going to go into the head menu here, and well, let's see. Let's go ahead and make this sort of. We can make his ears pretty pointy, kind of give him an elven look here. One thing I like to do when making cartoony characters is oversized eyes are a dead giveaway. So, like, you make his eyes a little too big, and then we can sink them back into his head a little bit more so they look a little more natural. Let's widen them out so that he's got a little bit more space in between his eyes. So as you can see, this character's starting to look pretty silly, but we're going to push it even further. So, this brings me to one of the limitations of Adobe Fuse is the selection of clothing. As you could probably tell from my assets here, I am making a fantasy game, so a lot of the clothing options that you'll find in Adobe Fuse are not going to be appropriate. You've got things like dress shirts and things like that. But there is a way to create more clothing. That'll be coming in a later tutorial. I definitely plan to make a tutorial of how to make clothes for your Adobe Fuse characters in Blender and then import them in. So keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, I think what we're going to do is we're going to have him wear no top, if I can find a no top option here. Let's give him some big old boots. Now there is this cool armor that we can give him, so that's pretty fantasy looking. He's starting to come together here. We'll give him a little braided hair, really make him really sell the look. And again, you can go in here and customize this to whatever you want it. Give him a little facial hair. So yeah, here's our little guy. As you can see, all the textures still retain a real realistic look. We are going to fix that, so bear with me on that. However, you can go to the texture tab here in Adobe Fuse, and you can actually change colors within Adobe Fuse. I don't recommend doing that for this particular tutorial because we can change those colors later in Photoshop, and I'll show you where we do that. But you know, just know that you do have the option to sort of change the fabrics, and you can change the sorts of materials that you have, change the skin color to, you know, really whatever you want. There's some presets in here that are pretty cool. So Adobe Fuse is an extremely powerful tool. It is so underrated what you can do. But now that we have our character here kind of designed out for us, what we're going to do is we're actually just going to go up to this little link here in the corner and send to Mixamo. Let's name our character Elf. Elf Warrior. Save, and it's going to export for us. Oh, and this is my favorite part, is the character is auto-rigged for you. How cool is that? Let's close that tab. So this process can take a couple minutes, but once it's done, your character is already rigged for animations, and then you can start adding animations, which is going to be awesome. I'm going to show you how we do that. And here we go. Our character is ready to use. As you can see, he's kind of in this little idle animation. That just shows you that he is loaded up properly. We're going to stick with the standard skeleton because that's going to give you, you know, 5 finger bones built in. You can use other fingers if you wanted to make like a 4-fingered Simpsons style character. You can do that, so that's pretty cool. But for this, you know, he's got 5 fingers, so we're going to use 5 fingers. Click Finish, and we are going to use this character. So you could just download him, but then you're not using all of the tools available to you in Mixamo. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to click Animate here. And as you can see, you get a list of animations. You can preview these animations on your character, which is pretty cool. One of the functions that Adobe took away when they bought Mixamo is the ability to build your own packs. But what they didn't remove, and this is a little secret that I'm going to show you, is that if you go into the search bar here and type pack, you will have access to all of the previously generated packs of animations. So what we're going to do is let's have a look for, how about the Sword and Shield pack? Now what this is going to do is it's actually going to download for us all 49 animations associated with this Sword and Shield character. So we got some running animations, some jumping, some blocking, some attacking. It's a complete package for you. So it's really just the total package. So what we're going to do is download. We'll keep our character in T-pose. We'll do 30 frames per second. I like to just keep it at FBX. There is an FBX for Unity option here. I honestly don't know what the difference is, but I've had better results when using just a standard FBX. And as you can see, our little character there is already looking pretty cartoony. It's kind of awesome. So, we have downloaded our character. Let's hop into Unity, where we are going to put our character in place. So we're going to create a new scene, that way we're not messing around in this test scene that I used to drop all of my assets into. So when you download the 3D Game Kit, you'll see in your assets folder, you've got the 3D Game Kit folder. I've got these assets, the low poly RPG assets, in a different folder. And then you have the standard assets that come with Unity. When you install that, that's got the character options in there. Now, one of the cool things about the 3D Game Kit is that you have this kit tools, and when you select that, you can create a new scene. We're going to drag that here. We'll call this scene tutorial. Create. We don't need to save this, so don't save. And there we go. We've got a preloaded scene that has, it's got a plane in it. It's got all these options in the hierarchy, such as the terrain and the player character, Ellen. It's really just everything you need to get a game started. That's our player character. So what we're going to do first is we're actually going to go ahead and delete Ellen out of the scene, because we're going to start with the easy version of the character retargeting, and that's the one in the standard assets. So I'm going to create a folder here just to stay organized, so bear with me here. Go to right click, create, and we're going to call it character. That's where we're going to store all of our character assets. Open that up, and then in your browser finder on Mac, you're going to scroll and find the downloaded file from Mixamo, the Sword and Shield pack. Unzip it if you have to. And then you're just going to go ahead and select all of these files, all of these FBX files, and just drag and drop them into Unity. It'll take a minute to import all those guys. And once that's done, we have all of our animations and our character model in the folder right here. So we'll drag him into our scene. And there's a lot of weird things going on. When you import these characters, not only are they imported transparent, I'll show you how to fix that in just a second, but they also are naked. They don't have their materials on them. So what we're going to do is go into this materials panel. We're going to extract textures, select that character folder. Now, what this is saying is that you've got a normal map in here that isn't set up as a normal map. You can go ahead and just hit Fix Now, and it's going to convert that normal map into a proper normal map. Now, he's looking better. You see that the colors are on him, but he's still rendering as transparent. So you can see his eyeballs and his skull in there. It's kind of gross. So what we're going to do is, instead of using embedded materials, we're going to switch that back to legacy, use external materials. And what this is going to do is, in this folder, it's going to create a materials folder for us. Now, the reason we want to use external materials is because it's going to give us the option to edit these materials. So what I mean is this. Here is our Elf Warrior material. And we're going to go ahead and change it to opaque. And now your character should be rendering properly. He's looking pretty sweet there. I don't know about you, but I think he's looking pretty good. But I think that we can make him look even better, because he still has these realistic textures, and his body is rendered with all of these, it just looks a little too perfect. It doesn't match our style quite yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to this folder where we have our, you can see the normal map and the occlusion map and all these things. What you're going to do is go to the texture map here, the diffuse texture map, and we're going to hit Reveal in Finder. That is going to pull up our folder here, and you can see that that's the image. And we're just going to go ahead and open in Photoshop. Now at this point, so you see this is where the mesh, the UV mesh is torn apart, and you see all of the different components of the texture laid out here for you. For bonus points, what you could do is you can actually go through here with the brush and color these parts in, but again, I am trying to teach you the quick, dirty, cheap way to get these results. If you did hand paint these, it would look a lot better, but I'm just going to show you how to use a couple filters to get, similar looking results. So first, what I like to do is duplicate the layer because I want to do this non-destructively, and so we're going to hide the original copy, and then on our copy of the layer, we are going to go to Filter and Stylize, Oil Paint. Now you can see that it kind of renders everything real swirly like that. You actually have a lot of options within these sliders if you want there to be more texture, less texture. Personally, I like having a real clean with not a whole lot of bristle details, because the bristle details will kind of make it look, it just doesn't look as good. So we're going to bump up the stylization, we're going to bump up the cleanliness, down with the scale, down with the brush detail, and make sure that lighting is unchecked, because the lighting actually will create textures where you don't want them to be. You'll end up having these swirls all over his face, and that just doesn't look good. So we'll hit OK. Now already you can see that it's starting to have this sort of hand-drawn look, all these parts of the body, and you can almost kind of identify where everything is. I mean, you've got teeth there, eyes, that's obviously a face. These are the hair textures. So if you wanted to, you really could go in and it'd be super easy to just paint in these textures by hand. But what we're going to do is we're going to hop in with a adjustment layer, hue saturation, sorry. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and bump up that saturation, get some real bright colors in there, maybe even just bump up the brightness a little bit. You don't want to bump up the brightness too much, because then you're gonna lose the colors that you already have in there. Really, this is all about just getting those colors to pop and make them look more cartoony. Then what I like to do is add a curves adjustment layer, and what that's going to allow us to do is really bump up the contrast in these lines and make it look super hand drawn. So already you can see the difference between what we've created here. I'm going to put it in a folder. So like this is what we've got. This is what we started with. So you can see how much of a difference it makes. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and hit Save As, and I like to save in TIFF format because then that'll preserve our layers and it'll allow us to make edits if we need to. We'll go ahead and save it in the same location. Keep those settings. Now when we jump back into Unity, it's going to import some of these extra assets that we just created. Now you see we have two diffuse layers now. One of them is black, one of them is white. The white one is the TIFF. So if you open up the materials folder and open up that material, up here in the albedo map, that is currently the PNG. What we're going to do is take the TIFF that we just created, drag and drop it into that little cube, and voila. We have a hand-painted looking cartoony character for our game. He's got, oversized features and exaggerated features. So this is kind of in line with the style of the game that we're making. Now that we've completed that step, we can talk about retargeting this character and making him a playable character. Okay, so there are two methods of retargeting that I want to talk about: the simple method and the more complex method. I'll put timestamps in the description in case you want to skip ahead to the more complex method, but we'll start with the easier method first, and then we'll go from there. So first, let's go ahead and delete our character out of the hierarchy here. So we removed him from the scene. Now in our assets folder, we're going to pull up the standard assets. We're going to hop into characters and third person character. And then we're going to go into this folder, prefabs. And we're going to take this prefab called third person character and just go ahead and drop him right into the scene. Now as you can see, this character comes with a pre-rendered model. We do not need him, so let's organize this a little bit. We'll put the third person character in the characters folder, and we'll make sure that he is on the characters layer of this scene. 17 there. And yes, change children. What that's going to do is it's just going to make sure that because the 3D game kit is designed to have special colliders for these different layers, the character layer makes sure that you stay on top of the ground. You're not just going to fall through it. So that's important. That's an important step for this process. So let's open this guy up, and this Ethan body, Ethan glasses, Ethan skeleton, go ahead and select those and nuke them. We don't need it. It'll say break prefab instance. That's okay. Now, we're going to go into our asset folder again. We're going to go into my character folder that we created. Now, the first step before we drag our elf warrior back in is we need to select him and all of these animations, because there's something that we need to change before we do this step. Deselect all of these. So you need to go into the rig tab of these animations and this model, and we're going to change the animation type from generic to humanoid. Avatar definition, we're just going to create one from this model and click apply. It's going to take a second to process all of that, but what it's going to do is it's going to make it so that all of the animations in this folder are compatible with the animation scripts that are already on the third person player controller. So it's an important thing that we do. Alright, now that that is done, we can go ahead and we're just going to select our elf warrior model here, and we're going to drag it inside that third person controller. And there he goes. He takes the place of where Ethan was. Now, the next thing we have to do is we're going to open up this third person controller, and over here in the inspector panel, you can see that the Ethan avatar is still on there. What that means is that the animations are still designed for Ethan. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the folder of the elf warrior inside the assets panel here. We're going to take this elf warrior avatar and drag and drop it onto Ethan. Now that we've replaced the avatar, one of the other steps that we have to do is, because the camera rig for this scene was set to the Ellen character that was in the scene, if you look, the follow and look at tabs of the camera settings in the inspector, they're missing. So we need to refill that. So what we're going to do is we are going to make sure that the elf warrior is what the camera follows. And then if you go into this little tab here where it says Mixamo, Orage, Hips, and we're going to go down to Spine, Spine 1. This is the skeleton that Mixamo creates when it makes all of these animations for you. And what we're going to do is we're going to take Mixamo head and put that in the look at area. Now that we've done that, when we go to play our game, we should have a fully animated, and there you go. He runs, you can control the camera with your mouse, he jumps. Ethan comes with a lot of cool little animations. What he doesn't come with are things like a health bar or attacks. Those things you would have to program in yourself. But as you can see, this is a pretty sweet character. Everything you need to have, a little platformer game or something like that. So we're going to quit out of that, and I'm going to show you a bonus step that is going to make your life a whole lot easier. What we're going to do is we're going to go down to our assets panel down here, and we're going to create an animator override controller. And we're going to call this Ethan Override. Then, if you look in the inspector panel for our Ethan Override, we've got no animator controller inside there. Go ahead and click this little circle button here and go to third person animator controller, select that, and drop it in. Now what you see here is it populates this little field where you have all of these different animations. What's cool about this is that you can actually go in, so first open up your third person controller, and we're going to drag the Ethan Override to the controller. We'll open that back up. Let's go ahead and lock that. And then you can actually take all of these animations that you've downloaded and use them instead of the animations that are already programmed in. So each of these little prefabs has the animations inside it. Now, if you want to stay organized, you probably want to rename the Mixamo.com animation to whatever the prefab is called. If you can't read all of the prefab, it's down here at the bottom of the panel. But just for the sake of keeping this short and sweet, what you do is you just go ahead and take these animations and you can drop them into place. So we've got a sword and shield run here. We're going to go ahead and override the humanoid run. Now I'm not going to go through and do all of these right this second, but when we go to play our game again, you will see that those animations in the animator controller have been replaced. So as you can see, instead of the normal idle animation, he's doing this paladin idle animation that we loaded in. So that's it for the easy method. Now let's show you the more complex method that I think you're going to like a little bit better. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the more complicated version of the retargeting our player character. I've loaded up a new scene here so that we could get Ellen back in here. Ellen is the character that comes with the 3D game kit, and so she's got her own prefab and everything in the 3D game kit folder. What I like about this is, so we're gonna go in and play this game, right? And she has a bunch of preloaded animations. She can run around. She's got some sound effects programmed in with her. She's also got some attacks with this sweet little staff, so that's cool. So there's a lot more to work with here than there was with that Ethan model. So it's just going to be more beneficial for us to map our character to this model as opposed to the 3D player model. Now, if you watched through the Ethan section, you know that we have to first go into our Elf Warrior here, and we needed to change the animation type from generic to humanoid, and we needed to do that both with the character himself and then all of the prefabs of the animations here, which you can do them in a big batch. So they're all humanoid and created from this model. So now what we need to do is go into our 3D game kit, and we're going to go into Art, Models, Characters, Ellen, and we're going to go ahead and select her and do the exact same thing. We're going to go from generic to humanoid, create from this model, and click apply. This is going to go pretty quick. Boom, done. Now the second part of this step is you have to go back into Art and Animations, Animation Clips. You're going to go into Characters, Ellen, and you need to select all of these Ellen animations that are already pre-baked into the package, and we're going to go ahead and set them to humanoid. but we're going to copy from another avatar here, and we're going to select the Ellen avatar. After clicking this little circle, pulls up that menu, makes it a little easier. Click apply, and it's going to take a little bit longer to process this, but once it's done, then both the Ellen rig and the elf rig are both going to be humanoid, so they'll both kind of, you know, be simpatico with each other. And there we go. We are ready to retarget this character and remap the character model to our character. So first what you're going to do is go into the Ellen in the hierarchy here, select both the Ellen body and the Ellen skeleton, and nuke them. We don't need them. It's going to break the prefab, but that's okay. Hit continue. And then we need to go back into our assets folder, character, and we're just going to go ahead and drag our elf warrior right here into the Ellen character. And it should appear at the bottom here, which is good. We want it down there, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Now the next step in this process, now I can't take full credit for this part because I followed a tutorial by Runemark Studios. I'll put a link in the description if you want the full tutorial on how to remap these characters. I'm using a slightly different process to do some different things, but they have a much more thorough retargeting system. And so, like I said, you know, credit goes to them. They wrote the script, and I am just copying it, and then I'm going to kind of expand upon it a little bit by adding an extra weapon and some cool stuff. I'll show you that in a second. We'll get there. Trust me. So this is going to be the only actual code editing that you're going to have to do. So when you click on Ellen here in the hierarchy, you scroll down to the player controller script, and go ahead and click that. Double click to open it. It'll pull up here, and I know this is intimidating, but it's actually a lot easier than you think. So what we're going to do is scroll down to a variable function called void awake, and that is when the player is spawned in game. And what we're going to do is right here in between melee weapon and S instance. So we're going to add our own function. It's a function that's built into Unity, where you look for an animator controller here. I'm going to use the autocomplete because I am prone to making typos. VS Code, it has an autocomplete function that I'm going to take advantage of. I suggest you do the same. So what we're going to do is get components in children. That is going to get it's going to pull the components, it's going to pull the properties from our elf warrior out of the Ellen object, because the elf warrior is a child of the Ellen object, and we're going to get the animator from that elf warrior. So we get that, and then we're going to put in this little if statement. Say if A is not equal to M animator, then execute this code. M animator, well, let's fix that. M animator. Avatar. We're going to set that equal to A dot avatar. And the next part of that is we're going to say A enabled right there. It's a little boolean. And we're going to set it equal to false, and close those statements with semicolons, and that's it. That's the whole thing. Basically, what this does is if it doesn't find the avatar that it's looking for in the Ellen prefab, it uses the avatar in the children, which is our elf warrior. So we're going to save that, hop back into Unity, and then there is another step that we're going to need to take. Oh, thinking about it. So go back into 3D Game Kit, Art, Animations, and go into Animators and Characters. And we're going to open up the Ellen Animator. And it's going to be important for us to select this respawn, double click it, and make sure that the root transform position, Y, is baked into pose. If it's unselected, go ahead and select it and click apply. What that's going to do is it's going to prevent a little glitch where the character spawns kind of halfway between the ground. So that's an important step. And when we hit play, if everything goes to plan, there we go. There's our elf warrior. You can control him, jump. He's still got a girl's voice, but we can fix that later. He's got an attack, but as you can see, the attack is a little broken there. That's because the staff is not mapped to his hand. But I'm going to show you something. We're going to do something a little bit different than just mapping the staff to his hand. We're going to go one step further here. So stick with me on that. What we're going to do is we're going to hop into our assets folder and go into my low poly RPG assets, and let's hit meshes. And we're going to grab this little sword that I've made. Now, you know, you could do this with any kind of weapon that you want to. What we're going to do is we're going to put the sword inside of the staff property of the character. Now, something we probably have to do, that sword's a little big, so we're going to go ahead and scale it down a little bit. Make sure that it's appropriately sized. I think that, like 75. Now let's go half of its normal size. Now it looks like it'll probably fit in his hand a little bit better. So, what we're going to do is, on our sword, we're going to hit reset position. And that puts it inside the staff. And let's go ahead and set this to 0. So that our rotation's 0, our position's 0, and our scale is 50, because it was a lot larger than the weapon that's already in the game. Now what we're going to do is open up our elf warrior and go down here into Mixamo origin here, and we'll select spine 1, spine 2. So the thing about Ellen is she is left-handed, so what we're going to do is we're going to put this sword and we're going to attach it to our elf warrior's left hand. I'll show you how we do that. We're going to go into left arm, left forearm, and here's our left hand. Now within that left hand, go ahead and right-click on that and create an empty object. We can rename that to weapon slot. There we go. And what we're going to do is, you can go ahead and grab the staff body, staff skeleton, and particle system. Just go ahead and delete those out of the staff, and then drag the staff itself down into that weapon slot. And then go ahead and reset the position to 0. Now select your weapon slot here. And what we're going to do is transform the weapon so that it actually fits in his hand when he's swinging it. So let's move it around a little bit. Up. And then we're probably going to want to rotate this bad boy. we're just going to make sure that it fits nice and snugly in his hand. That ought to do it. So once we've done that, we need to take the staff back out of our weapon slot, and we're going to scroll up to this section and put it in there next to the trail effect and the respawn particles. And then while we have the staff selected, we need to set it to follow the weapon slot. So go ahead and drag that weapon slot straight from the hierarchy into this fixed update follow script. And now, when we go into play, he's swinging our sword. So how cool is that? Now for our next problem. Those are some pretty girly animations and some girly sound effects. So let's go ahead and correct that while we've got him open here. This is a pretty quick and easy hack. And if you watched the Ethan portion of this, you know exactly what I'm about to do. So let's hop back into our character folder, and we're going to go to Create, right-click Create, and we're going to create an Animator Override Controller. And we're just going to go ahead and call it Ellen Override. Now what that does, if you look over the inspector, you've got this controller area, right? So what you're going to do is click that little circle and grab the Ellen animator, and you see how it goes ahead and populates our override controller. So then if you select Ellen, and we're going to go ahead and take this Ellen override controller and put it where Ellen was in the animator controller. Now we can override all of her pre-built animations with our own animations. So let's lock this in the hierarchy. Now again, I mentioned this in the Ethan section, the standard asset section of this tutorial, but what you do is you open these prefabs, and the animation is actually in here. It's named Mixamo.com, but you know, you should rename it just for organization's sake. I'm going to go ahead and skip that step just for brevity, and yeah, we can just go in here and replace all of the animations that we previously had. Alright, so there we go. We have the only ones that I didn't change out here are the jumping, because the jump animations in our Mixamo animations are complete jumps, whereas Ellen's jumps are built in stages. And yeah, everything else was replaced. Now the other thing that we have to do is we're going to hop back into our character, because these animations are right-handed, so our sword is going to be in the wrong place when we go to attack. So let's go ahead and correct that and put our sword where it's supposed to go. And when we hop into play, now our elf warrior has a new set of animations that he follows. Now, you see him kind of glitching out there, how he kind of stops, oop, and run, and run, and run. What's going on with him? I'm about to show you. So what you're going to need to do is go into these animations that you have. In particular, look for the animations that are running or idle, and you need to edit these animations. So with it open here, you see we've got our little preview of the animation. Click Edit and set it to loop. And that's as easy as it is. Click Apply. Now this is particularly important. You don't need to do this with the attack animations because those are singular animations, but you do need to do it with all of the idle animations, all of the run animations. It's a tedious process, but by doing this, it allows those animations to loop for you so that when you're actually playing the game, it doesn't play the animation once and then cut off. So unfortunately, this is something that Mixamo doesn't do for you. You have to go in and do it yourself. Okay, now that we've done all that, when we go in to play our game, he will actually keep running when we... And that animation doesn't stop. Now, the next cool thing... Those are our new attack options. Whoa! Now what you're probably going to want to do is, because we have removed Ellen's attacks, you probably want to go into the staff and go ahead and kill this trail effect. And that'll get rid of those cool swooshes. But then at least your animations will look a lot better. And there we go. That's our stylized character. I told you it was a lot easier than you thought it'd be. Of course, with the female sounds, that's a whole other story. You actually will have to go into the Assets 3D Game Kit audio folder. And the trick here is you're going to have to replace the animation sounds, these little emotes, with your own .ogg audio files, and then just name them appropriately Ellen emotes. Unfortunately, I don't have any audio files to replace them with at the moment, but next tutorial I will record my own voice into these emotes, and we will have a male voice for this male character. But I hope that this tutorial has been helpful for you in utilizing the assets available to you through Unity, both the Mixamo and then of course this 3D Game Kit asset pack from the Unity Asset Store. But that's it. That's all I've got. I hope that this has been helpful for you. Again, I'm going to put some links in the description to Runemark Studios, as they are the ones who put together the retargeting for the Ellen character from the 3D Unity Game Kit. So I hope you'll check that out. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.
Hey guys, if you like that video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you really like the video, check out my merch available on Society 6 and DM's Guild. Links below in the description. New products added every week. Thanks. Catch you later.